Michelle Remembers, Part 1, Deliver Me from Satan. I'm Jason Horton.
I'm Rebecca Lieb.
And this is Ghost Town.
I want to tell you about a book that kept me awake for 2 nights this week as I read it. It's one of those you can't put down books. It was a journey of horror, of sadism and perversion, a story of brutality and death. It is the story of a woman who wrestled with the devil and won.
Joining me now from Victoria is Michelle Smith, a one-time victim of abuse by a satanic cult, and Dr. Lawrence Pasder, the psychiatrist who helped her come to terms with that nightmare.
The book is called Michelle Remembers. The authors are Michelle Smith and Lawrence Pasder, MD, who, acting as a psychiatrist, distracted from her bizarre childhood memories of Satan, which have shocked many people.
I have to say that the evidence is clear that this came from an experience that Michelle had.
Michelle, can I ask you what it was that after 4 years of therapy and this deep state of consciousness that came out of your mind?
Basically, what I remembered was a 14-month period of my life at age 5, where I was given to a group of people. They would put me in cages, they would sacrifice animals, they would have a lot of candles and chanting and bizarre things I had never seen.
Eating feces and orgies and dismembering fetuses. These were things that you experienced.
That's right.
That's a clip from CBC Radio interview Morningside from 1980 and the beginning of the 2023 documentary film Satan Wants You, a critical deep dive into the sensational book and the controversial landscape it created. The first edition of Michelle Remembers featured a scared little girl on the cover, clutching a doll surrounded by darkness, save for lit candles, and above her, the grinning face of Satan himself. The cover of Michelle Remembers accurately teased what was inside, the details of a horrifying, torrid case of recovered memory therapy involving orgies, blood ritual sacrifices, child abuse, and so much more. The book became an instant bestseller, presenting its contents as inextricable fact. But in actuality, the book was far darker than the stories it told. Not exactly a reflection of the perversions of a little girl's long-repressed memory, but a record of how paranoia around Satanism would manifest in so many minds, holding a twisted mirror up to Western cultural norms and perhaps our greatest fears. Welcome to Ghost Town's 2-part Halloween series on the 1980 book Michelle Remembers and its festering legacy known as Satanic Panic. Part 1, Deliver Me from Satan. Now, of course, the idea of Satan was prevalent before the publication of Michelle Remembers, but to understand just how much of a hold the concept of the devil and their familiar name, Satan, had on people, let's go back, way back, into Judeo-Christian history. I promise we won't be here long. The first appearance of the word Satan comes from 3 books of the Old Testament, but it's not Satan as we know him. The term is actually Hasatan, a generic word for God's accuser or adversary, hardly the red devil character with a sharp 3-pronged pitchfork. In this context, Satan is an amorphous evil figure, set out to destroy humans in very specific contexts. Because of this, Jews didn't really believe in the standardized version of Satan. That would come after 70 AD with the New Testament. In 3 different books of the New Testament, Satan was quite a figure of temptation, demanding Jesus Christ do what he says and then promising him the world, literally, if Jesus worshipped him and only him. Each time Jesus rebuffs Satan's advances and promises, Satan gets a little pissier about the whole situation. So the New Testament branding of the devil leans into that, a kind of wronged yet seductive supernatural figure, describing the devil as a, quote, man-killer from the beginning, and, quote, the prince of this world, who is destined to be overthrown through Jesus' death and resurrection. Satan, the devil, then becomes one of the main characters in the Christian biblical doctrine, truly the final boss in Jesus Christ's journey to reclaiming the world from sin. The very metal book of Revelation in the New Testament takes this idea one step further, depicting Satan as the supernatural ruler of the Roman Empire and the ultimate cause of all evil in the world. Hands down. Unlike everything before, Satan is now the ringleader of other religions, including Judaism and the more ancient polytheistic belief systems. Revelation talks a lot about destructive beasts, which Christians conflated with Satan thereafter, and even numbers, including the notorious 666, known after Revelation as the number of the beast, Satan's branded number. So that's the biblical lay of the land regarding Satan, which plays out historically in a bunch of different, yet kind of similar ways. Here's the really important part in terms of Michelle Remembers and Satanic Panic. Satan doesn't really show up a lot in history unless some kind of religious or cultural conflict is happening. So people chilled out on Satan after a long time after the writing of the Book of Revelation, the downfall of the then popularized Greek and Roman belief systems, and even through the Middle Ages, where Satan was more comical and pathetic than terrifying. Until around the 15th century, when, guess what, the Christian Reformation threatened old-school Christian beliefs. In the late 15th century, witchcraft hysteria erupted in France and Germany. The German inquisitors Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger argued in their book Malleus Maleficarium, published in 1487, that all sorcery and witches were rooted in the work of Satan, and that those satanic works were all around us, all the time. We actually just did an episode on this wild book a couple of weeks ago if you want to learn more about it. It is incredibly fascinating. So throughout the 15th and 1600s, we first have panic over witchcraft. Not exactly Satanism, but close. That might have been because catching a suspicious local woman who seemed witch-like felt a little easier than catching, well, Satan himself. It's estimated that around 60,000 people were executed on the suspicion of witchcraft during the entire span of Europe's witchcraft hysteria. In the New World, around the same time, we see the same thing. Puritans, history's biggest buzzkills, being persecuted themselves by the Church of England and then coming into conflict with the Native Americans in America, and in turn believing that the Native Americans worshipped Satan. Satanism was also an extremely convenient way to explain why Puritans had such a hard time colonizing America, struggling with infertility, mortality, nutrition, shelters, and, well, pretty much every part of staying alive on a whole new and undeveloped continent. Not long after, history repeated itself again, when Satanism became a way for Christians to persecute Enlightenment thinkers in both America and Europe, ignited by the provocative and philosophical works of Voltaire, Milton, and Hume. While witchcraft history died down in Europe first, in New England during the late 1600s, we have, of course, the Salem witch trials, a mini bout of witch hysteria, at least according to history standards, that preyed on the hardships that the colonies had endured, specifically punishing women who were perceived of as more resourceful or outspoken in their own survival, or even children playing games that were looked upon as sacrilege. Throughout these witch hunts, torture and imprisonment were used by authority figures in order to coerce false confessions, which would lead to people's persecution, trials, and death, a cycle that was hard to escape from once you were initially accused. More than 200 people were accused of practicing witchcraft in Massachusetts, and 20 were executed around that time. It's very important to note that throughout all of this time in history, there was no evidence found of devil-worshipping cults or actual proven witchcraft in both Europe and the Americas. We see this all again in a more contemporary setting in the 1950s with McCarthyism. McCarthyism, led in part by U.S. Senator Joseph McCarthy, was defined by the repression and persecution of left-wingers during an aggressive campaign for spreading the fear of communist and Soviet influence on American institutions. Of course, Christianity and Christian values were conflated with conservatism, which, while left-wing ideas were thought of as other, foreign, threatening, and toxic. There was a lot of talks of satanic cults during this time, too, simply because of Satan's track record. If you weren't with Christianity and Christian values, you were with the devil. It's here that we reach the 1970s and early 80s, a time where moral panic was still underway with emerging new technologies, controversial art and music, women's liberation, and social justice, especially among younger people. But this new wave of satanic panic wouldn't start in Europe or the East Coast. It would begin with a memoir, conceived of by a soft-spoken housewife and her therapist in a sleepy part of Canada. More after this break. Most historians agree that Dr. Lawrence Pazder is the man who made Michelle Remembers and the satanic panic that ensued truly possible. Pazder, a physician and devout Catholic, was born in Edmonton, Alberta on April 30th, 1936. After gaining medical training at the University of Alberta in 1961 and the University of Liverpool in 1962, he practiced medicine in Nigeria from 1962 to 1964, where he found himself drawn to African religion and its various ceremonies. Still, he eventually came back to Canada to complete his psychiatric training, working at various Victoria, British Columbia hospitals and starting his own psychiatric private practice. Pazder looks like a friendly old man and has a life that seemed to reflect that. The white-haired married father of 4 reminds me a bit of Dick Van Dyke, a therapist that I would imagine many trusted with their mental health and well-being. One of these patients was Michelle Smith, who walked into Pazder's office in 1973, a college student who was alone in the world, the child of an alcoholic father and deceased mother. At that point, Pazder began treating Smith for depression, and the two liked each other, trusted each other. Here's an excerpt about Michelle's background from the book.
She told him she had a collection of minor problems. Fear of airplanes, fear of spiders, fear of being alone. She sensed she had over-idealized her mother, and that the grief over her mother's death was disproportionate and still largely unresolved. She wanted to marry and have children, she said, and she didn't want to pass problems on to them. Doctor and patient set to work, 1 appointment a week. As they went deeper and deeper into Michelle's background, Dr. Pazder saw how truly horrible her early life had been. Deep psychotherapy was needed, and the endeavor extended over 4 years. Diligently, they worked through the problems. At the end, both of them were pleased with the strides they had made. True, they had never been able to understand why she used to eat erasers, but that hardly seemed to call for further psychotherapy.
Though the two stopped working together after the first round of treatment, Dr. Pazder then continued to have a relationship with Michelle, even attending her wedding. But after a traumatic miscarriage, Michelle entered a hospital, and Dr. Pazder began his work with her again. One session, Smith came in and told Pazder that she had something important to tell him, but she couldn't remember what it was. Eventually, Smith tells Pazder about a dream where she itches her hands, and tiny, countless spiders appear from where she had just itched. After that, the relationship between Pazder and Smith became something completely different. Wild, the stuff of, well, sensational memoirs. There was one session where Smith allegedly screamed for 25 minutes nonstop and eventually started speaking in the voice of a 5-year-old, detailing a satanic ritual. Here's an excerpt from Michelle Remembers about that session.
Michelle broke into great, heaving sobs. I got a big shirt. I was trying not to be there. You see, it doesn't make any sense, but I thought that if I didn't see my hands, I wouldn't be there. I had this shirt pulled over my head, and I don't know why I thought I'd get away with it, except I was so busy trying to keep my hands up inside the sleeves. I didn't notice the people in the room. Some women had entered the darkened space where the little girl was a prisoner. They walked in a single file, oblivious to the child's presence. Clad in the oversized shirt, she watched, in fear and awe, as they went about their bizarre tasks, methodical, coldly efficient, each of them doing a particular chore. One woman pushed the bed to the side of the room. Another moved a bureau. Some of them went about tacking up large black sheets on all 4 walls. Then the women began to set up candles, perhaps 20 or 30 in all. Someone draped the bureau with a round black cloth, embroidered in an intricate white design. On top of the cloth were placed 2 silver goblets and a knife, and more candles. I thought, mommies. I thought, oh boy, there's going to be a party. Oh boy. But no, they're all looking at me. They're staring at me, all of them, all their eyes. One of the women approached Michelle and picked her up. The little girl's apprehension faded. She could not help but smile. The women were extraordinarily beautiful, with shining dark hair. Unlike the others, who wore simple black dresses, this woman wore a black cape with a hood. It set her apart. Michelle thought, ah, a princess. How hurt you are, the woman cooed. How sad I am that you are hurt.
The doctor responds to this episode, hell-bent on helping his patient.
Michelle was screaming, begging, her fingers bent like claws. Whether in a gesture of panic or attack, Dr. Pazder could not tell. He was deeply moved by his patient's struggle, and at the same time realized that the only way he could assist the child, and therefore the woman whom the child had become, was to allow her to relive the entire ghastly experience, wherever it came from, whatever it meant.
Pazder decides hypnosis is the way to recover these memories and work with them. So for the next 14 months, Pazder spends more than 600 hours helping Smith recover what he believes are vast, detailed, and violent memories of satanic ritual abuse that occurred when she was around 5 years old. After Pazder and Smith worked together in a clinical context and discovered all of this information, the two immediately hightailed it to various Christian authorities and eventually to the Vatican to get religious leaders on board with a book. Needless to say, the Catholics were on board with winning the fight against the devil, and Michelle Smith and Dr. Pazder set out to write their book chronicling their work together in hopes of educating the world about its veiled satanic dangers. You've just heard a bit of how the book reads, but I want to emphasize that Michelle Remembers is high drama from the first cover to the last page. It begins with a quote that really ramps up this drama off the bat. Quote, "To all who have the heart to hear the cries of children and the courage to stand up for them." Already, it's kind of a moral invitation. Then the book continues with a statement by Pope Paul VI and Remy Deroux, Bishop of Victoria, British Columbia, both giving the book their seal of authenticity and approval. Here's an excerpt from Deroux's paragraph.
The Church is well aware of the existence of mysterious and evil forces in the world. Each person who has had an experience of evil imagines Satan in a slightly different way, but no one knows precisely what this force of evil looks like. I do not question that for Michelle, this experience was real. In time, we will know how much of it can be validated. It will require prolonged and careful study. In such mysterious matters, hasty conclusions could prove unwise. It may well be that for people today, to hear this message coming from a 5-year-old child is of particular significance.
Then the publisher, Thomas B. Congdon, weighs in on Michelle's trustworthiness, saying,
I first met the authors 2 years ago, and have had much contact with them. During the final stages of the editing of this manuscript, the authors came to New York and for nearly a month lived in my own home, shared meals with my family, sometimes talked long into the night with us. We came to know them well. In a way, one does not come to know someone over the phone or in the office. Even my normally skeptical teenagers found Michelle Smith and Larry Pazder the most decent and modest and genuine of people. Along with Dr. Pazder and the church officials who knew her so well, I believe that Michelle is not a hysteric, not even a neurotic. She seems as clear as a glass of well water. She appears to be one of those rare people, like Joan of Arc and Bernadette, whose authority and authenticity are such that they can tell you things that would otherwise be laughable. Yet you do not laugh. You do not dismiss or
There's
forget.
a lot of convincing going on before the book even really starts, of course, because of the outrageousness of its contents. The rest of the book becomes a chronicle of these dramatic, unholy hypnosis sessions between Smith and Pazder, where Smith recounts, in her adult voice and in her baby voice, repressed memories that span over a year, from 1954 to a final climactic 81-day ritual in 1955. She details these horrific experiences, alleged torture, how she was rubbed with blood and body parts of human sacrifices, how she was locked in cages, sexually assaulted, and forced to participate in all kinds of satanic passages from the cult which her mother belonged to. End of an 81-day ritual to Pazder. The final event, the aforementioned 81-day ritual, supposedly Satan himself is summoned, and Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and Michael the Archangel all intervene. This event removed the scars received by Smith throughout the year of abuse and blocked memories of the events, quote, until the time was right. Here's Michelle recounting that climactic, again, end of an 81-day ritual to Pazder.
It was all black and red like a fire in the night, said Michelle, slipping back swiftly into her remembering. And then there was this man. But he was like an animal, too. He's standing in the fire. He's looking out at me from the fire. Oh, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. He's shooting fire out of his fingertips. And now from his eyes. Oh, dear God. He keeps changing shape. It's so ugly. So ugly. He makes his tail fly around. It's a snake. No, it's coming out at me. It's wrapping around my neck. It's on fire. It burns. It burns. Michelle began to gag, and Dr. Pazder thought he might have to keep her from choking on her own tongue. But she stopped gagging. She wrapped her arms around herself. I got so scared. I'm so scared. I got frozen. Frozen cold. And I can't move. I'm burning and I'm freezing to death. The fire doesn't do any good. And then slowly, Michelle's countenance lightened. All of a sudden, it's like morning, and it's not scary anymore. It's not a bright light, but it takes the scary away. And there's a man, and he's got white on. He's really far away. Then he starts coming closer. When he gets close, then I can't see the bad man that scares me anymore. I don't seem to need to say anything to this man in white. I can't anyway, because I'm so scared to open my mouth. I'm really glad to see him.
Pazder was shocked and supportive of Michelle's journey, and in the book he often second-guesses what he's hearing, though he continues on this journey with his patient. Again, a devout Catholic, Pazder seemed to believe he was on the verge of uncovering a vast satanic conspiracy, and his work with Michelle was at its best divine, at its worst of the utmost importance to the church and his psychiatric practice. After Michelle is quote-unquote healed, the two then wrote Michelle Remembers together, thinking it would spur a religious revolution. And in a way, they were right. On November 1st, 1980, Michelle Remembers was published and immediately became a bestseller. But the salaciousness of the book didn't end on the page. Controversy, mayhem, paranoia, infidelity, and more would be stoked by the flames of Michelle Remembers, more than anyone could have ever imagined. Next time, part 2 of Michelle Remembers, The Devil's Playground.